Hi, cutie pies. This is Lanickia, and I am coming to you with another episode of the Equalizer, which was really good tonight. But it's another episode of the Equalizer, which was season 2, episode 13. It was called D.W.B. Okay, so let's just get right into it. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. All right, so just jumping right into the episode. So we see two cops, and they're trying to find a suspect who has, I guess, went in and attacked a fellow officer and broke his leg in 3 places. Now, the suspect is a black male driving a black SUV. So they're like, okay, we got to find him. So it just so happens that in this little town called Gatlin, I think, or Gatlin. It just so happens that Dante happens to be there, I guess, driving through. And he's in a black SUV. So they approach Dante. They're like, get out with your hands up and all this. And he's like, what's going on? Because Dante, of course, is an officer, so he knows his rights. And they're like, pop the trunk. We're going to check the trunk. And he was like, no, you have to have a search warrant and everything to check my trunk. And so, the older officer, who we find out later his name is Jim, he's just, he doesn't like the fact that Dante knows his rights. And Dante tries to tell him, because he starts roughing him up, and he tries to tell him, hey, I'm a police officer. Well, Dante reaches in his coat area, and the guy thought he was pulling a gun, so he hit him with the baton, and he knocks him out, and he starts bleeding. And the other officer, who we find out name is Ted, he's just like, oh my god, what did you just do? Now, if you look at this episode, Ted was not all the way with what Jim was doing from the very beginning of the episode. You could tell he was really hesitant, but then you could also see that age difference between the two. But you could tell that he was really kind of hesitant on how forceful Jim was and everything that he was doing. But he was also complacent in the fact that he just went along with it. Now, he tells him, oh my God, what did you just do? And Ted says, look, oh my God, we're going to be in trouble. Like, he is a detective, he's for the NYPD. And so Jim is just like, we got to grab him and get him and let's go. And Ted was like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you saying? He says, we're going to be in trouble for this. Like, do you know how much trouble we're about to be in? We got to get rid of him. And Ted, he was just like, like, we can't do that. Like, we just need to confess. And he was like, we can't confess to this. You know what will happen to us? We'll lose our jobs. And so he convinces Ted to help him get rid of Dante. He was like, put him in the trunk. Put him in the truck, the vehicle, car, the police patrol car. And so he does. He puts them in the patrol car and everything, and they drive off. But when they drive off, they're speeding so fast that they hit. Their bumper hits the curb. There's an area in the curbs. I'm sorry, guys, because I can see it in my head, and I'm just like, okay, get it out. But anyways, their bumper hits the curb. Now, what they don't know is that Dante had his sons with him, so they're looking like, what's going on? They were in the restroom, and so they're coming out the restroom, picking up snacks or whatever, and everything, because Dante was just pumping gas. So they're coming out the restroom, picking up snacks and everything, and they see their dad being thrown into this car, and the police officer's speeding off. So they're like, oh my God, Dad. And the man who's owning the store is like, hold on, you're stealing or whatever. And they're like, that's our dad being taken away. I'm like, sir, all this commotion going on outside, you heard nothing. He was just stocking the shelves or whatever. And so then we see that Robin gets a phone call, and it's Dante's children. And so she gets there, and they say, our dad told us to contact you if we ever have any problems. Now, they've also the store owner called the mom as well, and so she's there, and they were like, did you call the police? He was like, I didn't know what was going on or whatever, so no, he didn't call the police. And she was like, I need to see the footage. And he was like, cameras don't work. And she was like, of course they don't. Robin was like, of course they don't. Now the mom gets there and she's like, oh my gosh, boys. And she was like, who are you? And they're like, she was like, I'm a friend of Dante's. Now the mom was throwing off a kind of vibe that was just like off-putting, because I get, she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know what Dante is and everything. So she was kind of off-putting when when she was talking to Robin. But Robin is just like, I'm gonna find your dad or whatever. And so she gets on the phone with Harry, and Harry was like, there are no cameras. They're absolutely right. There are no cameras. There's no evidence. There's no there's no footprint, because it's a town just kind of in the middle of nowhere. And so they have no information. So then Robin goes and speaks to the sheriff. And he has a snotty little attitude. He's like, no, I'm not going to give you any information. No, we don't have anyone that was brought in or whatever. And you city people, like, he's one of those, in a country town. And like that, being from a country town, they really are like that. But he's from a country town, like some of them. He's from a country town, and he's just like, no, you city slickers are not going to come in here and tell us we doing something wrong or whatever. And so she's like, okay, well, us people are going to come back with a warrant and everything, and you're going to have to show us the police logs and everything. So she goes. So then we see Dante, as we see he's locked in like this dirty abandoned building, and he calls out. He was like, hey, let me out. I need to see my sons. I need to know where are my sons? Because he doesn't know what happened, because they knocked him out. So then we see that Robin goes and talks to Avery. She's the DA, and she says they're doing everything legally that they can do. And she says, there's one more thing I can do, and I'll let you know. She said, but legally, we're doing everything I can do. And Robin's just like, we have to find him. And she was like, because the DA does like Dante as well. So she's like, I know, I'm doing everything I can possibly do to try to find him, see where he is, and bring him back. And so then we see that Robin meets with the wife, and because she's at the police station and everything, and she tells her that she and Dante were not she was more into Wall Street and everything, and she let her work consume her. And so because of that, she and Dante grew apart. And so Dante kept the boys because he found a way to balance it all or whatever. And she said, and she did tell Robin, that if Dante trusted her enough to tell his boys, to memorize her phone, because the boys told her, Robin earlier, that Dante told them, memorize my phone number and everything. So she said, if you're somebody that he trusted enough to tell them that if you are ever in trouble, contact her, find her, let her know what's going on, then I trust you. Just please bring him back. And so the boys talk to Queen, Dante's children. They're like, bring our daddy home. And she's like, I'm going to do everything in my power, to bring him home. I'm going to bring him home and everything. So then we see, so Marcus is in the room, and he's hallucinating because, he's lost blood. He's been knocked out. He's lost a lot of blood and everything. And he goes back and he thinks about his dad as being a dirty cop. And he says, and it was just remembering how he was asking his dad, why would you hurt that man? And his dad was telling him it was between me and him, and I had to do what I had to do. I had to do what I had to do. And Dante was like, that wasn't right though. And he was like, if it's me or him, you always you have to protect yourself and everything. And then someone throws him a water, and he calls out and tries to tell him, hey, help me and everything. So Avery, the DA, and Robin go to the judge, and they're like, hey, we need a search warrant. We need you to back us on getting these police logs. And so he's like, okay, I'll do it. His name is Thomas. So Thomas goes and he talks to the sheriff, and the sheriff is just like, oh, now you want to do this with them or whatever. And he's just like, listen, just give them the log so they can, get off our case and get off our backs. And the sheriff was like, he didn't want to. And Tom was just like, okay, if you don't give the logs, then I'm gonna have to get a search warrant because I'm gonna be like, what are you trying to cover up? So he was like, okay, give him the logs. So they give him the logs, and it does show that Dante was not booked, and they don't have anything for that. And so quit. Robin, sorry guys. So Robin goes and she's like, I want to see the cells or whatever just to make sure he wasn't registered as a John Doe. And so she goes and she looks back there and it's nothing or whatever. And, he's not there. But she still is like, something is off or whatever. Now Ted is there and he sees them and he goes and finds Jim and he's like, they had a DA there and a judge there. Like, we need to let this man go and and just wash our hands of this. They're like, he's like, no, we have to take him out to the farm or whatever. And they called the name of the farm, what was it called? Youngstrom's farm. He was like, we need to take him out to the farm. And Dante hears this and he's just like, oh my gosh, And so then we see Dante. He's hallucinating again, and he's thinking about his mom. And his mom is telling him, he was asking his mom, why did you stay with dad? And she was like, there's good in everybody. And he was like, grandma always used to say, you'll find the good in everybody. And she was like, you need to do that now, Dante. You need to find the good in everyone. And so someone throws water at him, and she says, go, because remember, he's hallucinating. So he runs to the door, and he was like, hey. And he starts talking to the man and he tells him, my boys were there and I need to know what happened to my boys. And he says one of his boys plays ball, but they suck. His team suck, but he loves him. So he was like, what you gonna do it as a dad? And then he says his other boy steals his socks and he pretends that he doesn't like it, but he likes it or whatever. And he was like, do you have kids? And we know Ted has kids because that's one of the ways Jim has convinced Ted not to say anything by saying, what's going to happen to your daughter? And Ted says, yeah, I have a daughter. And so Dante tells him, my sons were there. They were there that night. I just need to know what happens. And so Ted runs off and he goes and he tells Jim, it's like, his boys were there. We need to let this man go. He just wants to go back to his family because Dante told him, just let me go back to my family. I won't tell anything. I won't say anything. But of course, Jim won't, he won't do that. So then we see Dante's ex-wife is at the house and Kyler, the son, he's upset and he won't come out of the room and Robin drops by and she was like, thank you for coming over. And she says, he had something so she starts telling Robin about how she wanted to have these conversations with the boys about, how unfair the world can be, especially towards black people. But Dante wanted to hold off because he was like, he didn't want his boys seeing him in a different light. Like, police officers kill us, but you're a police officer. What? And so Dante wanted to hold off on having this conversation. And she regrets it. Well, she says Kyler has information, but he won't come out of his room. And he does come out. And he apologizes to his mom. And she says, it's okay, baby. And he tells Robin, you told me to close my eyes and just think about what, I remember. He said, I remember they scraped something, like the car hit or whatever. And she was like, you did good, baby. And I'm going to go find him or whatever. So, so then we see the sheriff goes and talks to Jim. And he tells him, hey, why didn't you tell me, like, there was no logs for you guys. I had 8 patrol cars out. Only 7 of them brought back logs and everything. And he said, you guys didn't have any logs. And he said, what's going on, Jim? And he said, Jim admits, yeah, we talked to the cops, but we didn't have anything to do with it. He was fine when we left him. He said, well, why didn't you report it? He said, because, with the whole Black Lives Matter and all of this going on, and here we are, and now he's missing and everything. We didn't want to be caught up in that. And he was like, and my wife's been through a lot, and she couldn't take this. Like, I guess she's in bad health. This would be bad on her health. And so he was like, me, how I am. But the sheriff is just like, huh. But he asked Ted, he was like, is that how it went, Ted? And Ted is just, again, he could say something, but he doesn't. He just said, it's just, yes, sir, that's how it went. Excuse me. But the sheriff I don't think the sheriff really believed him. We don't see the sheriff anymore, but deep down, he knows that wasn't the case or whatever. So then we see, Harry says, Jim, there were no logs for the vehicle of Jim and Ted. There were no logs for that day. And so she was like, okay, where are they or whatever? So she goes and meets them. So Jim and Ted are talking at breakfast, right? And Jim is just like, Ted, because Ted is again talking about, we should just give this up. Like, I don't see this ending well. And Jim is like, we don't have any choice. We're going to have to take care of it, and then it'll all be behind us. And that's when Robin comes and sits down. And she starts telling them, about Dante and how she's going to have a team come out and they're going to be looking for Dante and they're going to find him or whatever. And she tells them to get the bumper taken care of on their car, whatever. So now they know that she's onto them. While that's going on, we see that Dante is actually hallucinating again and just thinking about his dad and how, he could possibly die there. And so it makes him get up and he writes out on like he finds something to write with, a piece of metal to write with, and he just writes out Dante. Dante was here, and Youngstrom, where they were going to take him, to dump the body and everything. So then we find out that a bug was planted on them or whatever. So they're tracking the car. Well, they're tracking the car, and she's telling Harry, like, because Robin is following him, she's telling Harry, like, where are we? And he says, you're right there on the car. So she gets out and they're gone. So they've switched cars because they realize we got to move Dante. And so Harry is like, I can't find anything, but Val actually comes out and she says, Mel actually comes out and she says, I found something. This man named Curtis, he was actually going through the town, and a young Jim, he was a rookie cop, and an older cop actually harassed him. The older cop harassed him and beat him up pretty bad. And Jim was actually the person who turned in the older cop. And it was like, how does he go from turning in the older cop for, harassing and misconduct and everything to becoming one? And Robin was just like, over time. It just happens over time. So they go and meet Curtis, and because they're like, we got to find any information because they've moved Dante. So they go and meet Curtis. And he tells them, I signed an NDA. And they were like, a good man could be hurt because of this. And he's just like, forget it. No amount of money is worth, keeping quiet. And it won't stop the nightmares he still has. And he says that he was just driving through and he got pulled over, and they didn't like that he knew the law, and they thought he was mouthing off. And so they beat him up, and he heard his ribs crack, and then he heard like they put him in a truck, and he went over like a metal bridge because he remembers that noise and he'll never forget it. And so they were like, he said, it felt like I was in an abandoned county building or a school or something like that. So Harry starts tracking this down, and he finds the building is an abandoned school. And so once they find that abandoned school, Robin goes in and she says, I can't find him anywhere. I've looked everywhere and he's not here. So then they find out. So she's looking around and she doesn't see him. But then she says, oh my gosh, I see something. It says Dante was here. And she says, oh, he's telling us where they went, the name of the farm and everything. So they find the name of the farm. And then we see Ted and Jim are actually driving Dante out to the farm. Now Ted is driving he's not, I guess I'll call him the somewhat good guy. And Jim is in the passenger seat. And we see Dante in the back. And Ted is still trying to say, we don't have to do this. But Jim is like, just be quiet. When it's all over, you'll be okay. Just think about your daughter. So then we see Dante in the back. And his father, he hallucinates, and his father's telling him, get up, like, fight. You're just going to let them beat you up and go home, run into your mom. Get up and fight. And so Dante wakes up and he loosens his arm some kind of way. He cuts his hand because they had tied his hands, but he cuts them free, and he crawls through the back seat because from the trunk to the back seat in the newer cars you could push them down. So he pushes down the back seat, and he grabs a hold of Jim, and they start swirling the road and everything, and they try to shoot him, but he knocks the gun out, and anyways they crash. So then Dante gets out of his backseat of the car and he starts walking away. But unfortunately for him, Jim shoots him as he's doing this. Now Robin is on her way, but she has not made it yet because she's trying to figure out where they are on the farm. And so, unfortunately for Dante, he shoots him. And then Ted comes and he stands in front of Jim and he's like, we don't have to do this. We could let it end here. And he was like, he would tell on us. And he was like, maybe he should. Like, look at what he's done. Maybe he should. Maybe it's for the best. And Jim was like, oh, you're right, or whatever. So Ted is turning around to, go get Dante so they can turn themselves in or whatever. And then Jim knocks Ted out from the back and he's like, you'll thank me later. And so he goes up to Dante, and his dad is again with him, telling him, get up, you got to get up. So he hops up and he's trying to go again. But the man keeps shooting at him. So then we see Dante like disappear, and the man is looking, and he's like, Ted was right. We should just talk about this, and maybe we have went too far and everything. But he's just trying to lure Dante out. And then he walks past, and then all of a sudden you see Dante come out of the leaves and wrap his arms around the man, and he and the man just start fighting. They start tussling over the gun and everything, and they're going back and forth. And then Dante picks up a rock and he just starts beating the man in the face until I thought he was gonna stop, but he didn't, and the man died. And then Dante just collapses, and as he's collapsing, he has a hallucination about Robin, and he's like, he's thinking about her, and they're like dancing, and it looks like it's a romantic hallucination. And then he's like, this ain't right. Like, it's cold. Why is it so cold or whatever? And you can hear her telling. Then you hear Robin saying, Dante, like, telling him to get up. And so he finally, he comes out of it, and she's like, I'm here. So she's found him in the woods or whatever. And we see that she gets him to the hospital, and he wakes up and he's like, thank you. And she's like, no, don't talk, save your energy. She said, there's people who want to see you. And his boys and his ex-wife, and the ex-wife just thanks Robin for everything that she's done for them. And then the next scene we see Dante is in the car with Robin, and she tells him, no matter what, I'm here for you. Are you sure you want to do this? And he's like, yes, I have to do this. I have to find out, where I'm going to be going, like where I have to come to a conclusion about the type of man I am and who I want to be. And so he gets out of the car, she told him, get out of the car or whatever. And so he gets out of the car and he goes in and he's packing up his things at his office. And Avery comes and she says, please don't do this. But he's like, I have to. And she says, she tries to tell him, it's not your fault that, you killed that man. Like, they were going to kill you, but he's like, he just needs to, he doesn't want to live in that gray area, because Dante is about right and wrong or whatever. He doesn't want to live in that gray area and everything. So he turns in his badge and he walks out of the station, and that's how it ends. It was a really good episode. I liked it. It was a kind of about Dante, and I was kind of sad. I realized, I was like, oh, they didn't show DR and Vi, but like they was like, listen, we got a lot going on, and we can't have no cutesy moments with you guys because we got a lot going on in this episode. But overall, it was a really good episode, and I enjoyed it. So I will see you guys in a few weeks, because it's not going to air again until April the 10th. So I'll see you guys in a few weeks, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.